strangle. Now, it's generally accepted that what you dream can reveal an awful lot about your hidden fears and desires, but our next guest would argue that his own dreams are altogether more significant. He claims that over the past few years, his sleep has been interrupted by cryptic messages that have enabled him to predict real-life disasters and even terrorist bombings. Chris Robinson tells his extraordinary story in a new book entitled Dream Detective, and he joins us now. When did all this start, Chris? Because it was kind of relatively late, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It all started in September of 1989, and I went to bed on a Saturday evening, quite normally, and I woke up somebody else. What had happened is I'd had a dream which was so real that I was confused when I woke up as to whether or not the dream was real or whether waking up was real. And in that dream, a soldier who had died had taken me to a hotel where he had told me some terrorists were staying, and the dream was so frightening that I went and told it to the police.
Who thought you were bonkers?
Who thought I was bonkers. Until 11 days later some terrorist suspects were arrested where I said, and of course they then came back with a vengeance and said, hey, how did you really know? And of course that's the start of the story, really.
And you've had what you say are predictive dreams ever since on a regular basis?
Absolutely, on a regular basis.
And that's been quite scary. I mean, is it like you turn to your sort of local vicar and the local police for help as to
the police,
what to do?
The police were the first people I went to because of the nature of that first dream. After we realised that it was true, and I knew I was telling the police the truth about their dream, I thought, I need somebody else to tell me what's going on here. And I went to my local church and said, hey, you know, what's going on? I mean, am I dead now? I mean, is this what it's like? And I think I'm alive still, you know, and I should go and lay down somewhere. And he said to me, well, if you're dead, I'm dead too. Come and see me every morning with what you've dreamt, and we will see just how much of it is dreams of the future.
So you keep this sort of dream diary?
Yep, keep a diary.
What are the most dramatic things that you reckon that you've predicted then?
Well, I mean, all the major news events filter into the dreams at some point. And if there's going to be a plane crash and it's going to make, you know, the front pages of the newspapers, I'm going to dream it. You might not know enough to know where that is going to happen, but you'll know enough certainly to say, hang on a minute, this is exactly that event. You won't confuse it with something else.
Other than having your word for it, why should I believe what you say?
I think if you talk to the people who I talk to, and when we wrote the book, the police officer that dealt with me for 6 years, sometimes on a daily basis, agreed to write the foreword for the book. Now what you've got to do is say, would that policeman write that about this book if this was not true?
Which policeman was this?
Chief Inspector Hall.
And is he your main...
well, not now. He retired just before Christmas, and I've been given somebody new. But when he wrote that, he was still the policeman, and we had to actually change it at the bottom to X very quickly while they were printing it.
It says, despite the vagueness of many of his dreams, we have worked together on a number of investigations, and Chris has been able to offer helpful information in relation to major crimes and terrorist activities. If we turn to the back of the book, it gives a whole list of 10 dreams that came true for Chris Robinson. I won't read you them all, but the execution in Iraq of British journalist Fazid Bazoft, a fatal explosion on board a Philippine airliner, the death of 4 London Underground track engineers in a freak accident, the IRA car bomb that killed Conservative MP Ian Gow. If it's true that you did predict all these events, you haven't really been very successful in preventing any of them, have you?
Well, I don't know whether the purpose of this is to prevent them. Certainly I have prevented certain things, and of course once you prevent something, it doesn't become a reality. What you know is that you were in a certain location, and I've got to be careful what I say, and I've been asked to be careful by the police anyway.
Can you say what you prevented?
Without saying a name, I'll give you an instance. Back in 1991, I'd had a dream about 2 terrorists going up to a bank in St Albans and blowing themselves up. Now that dream was on a Thursday night. On the Friday night, 2 terrorists did go up to a bank in St Albans and blow themselves up. Now the police asked me, could I name the terrorists for them? Could I ask... In fact, the words of the police officer were this: we don't know how you do this, but we accept that you do. Go home and talk to whoever it is you talk to, because we want their names. Well, on the Monday morning I had the names of the terrorists. 10 days later we knew the names that I'd been given in the dream were the correct names. The following weekend I dreamt of somebody who was quite an important person in the government being shot at a marquee tent on the weekend. Now, I spoke to Chief Inspector Hall and I said, I've dreamt of this person being ambushed and shot. I said, but he's at a tent in somebody's garden. So he said to me, well, it's very easy. He said, this is November. He said, that's not likely to be right, is it? And I said, well, no. I said, but the dream was so vivid and real, I think it has to be right. Anyway, he phoned me back on the Saturday morning, Mr. Hall, and said to me, you ain't going to believe this, but he's going to be at a function at a marquee in somebody's garden on Sunday. We've put a sterile zone of 3 miles around it. Now, of course, we don't ever know whether somebody was going to try and shoot him there. What we know is that everything in the dream that I shouldn't have known about his whereabouts matched up with the reality. Difficult.
Yes, I mean, it would obviously be more impressive if, for instance, you
had been shot. So that would have been, yeah, and everyone has said, oh, well, you didn't have enough to prevent it. You've actually got this problem where if you do something about it and you stop it, your premonition isn't real. If you just leave it alone and let it happen, everyone says, oh, that was good, but you didn't help anybody. It's catch-22, really.
Yes, but I mean, you certainly haven't been able to prevent major IRA outrages, for instance, have you?
No, but you know it will happen.
And are you saying that they take you seriously when you ring up now and say
Well, over the last 6 years, various policemen from various police forces have come to me and said, look, we've got an inquiry, can you help us with this? And the amount of information that you've been able to provide from a dream about their active inquiries is quite astounding.
You mentioned earlier on that they said, and we don't know who it is you talk to, who talks to you.
Well,
is that right?
I know who talks to me as a perception. Now, the problem is this. There are 2 police officers who have been murdered, who come into my dreams, and they talk to me. Now, we sit down with their information, and one of the police officers spoke to me on the 1st of February this year, for the first time in about 18 months, and said that the ceasefire was over. Do this, this, and this is going to happen. Now, the police sit next to me and they say, well, how do I know it's her? Well, the truthful answer to that is, of course, I don't know it's her. All I can say is that when I am asleep and she is in front of me, I see it as her. And I think that's why there's lots of universities and that now setting up experiments for me to undertake, to see if we can prove, first of all, what's happening, why it's happening, and then I'd love to prove that these people really are there, because I think it's nice.
Have you ever said who they are?
Oh, it says in the book who they are. It's WPC, Yvonne Fletcher, and Keith Blakelock.
Have you got any predictions for us at all? Care to give us?
Well, I tried to dream what was in the contents of one of your boxes, and I came up with 2 items. It was either a book or a piece of jewellery. I don't quite know.
It was a piece of jewellery, actually. This is our researcher, Jess.
And I actually did a similar thing for Central Weekend on Friday night, and I said it's a piece of joist, a piece of old wood. And he says, well, you're right, it was a piece of wood from Nottingham Castle that was 400 years old.
The other thing you said actually to our researcher was that you kept seeing slides.
Well, I saw a photographic laboratory with carousels, slides, and it was all to do with a photographer, but I really
that was her
wasn't sure.
dad who gave her the ring.
Yeah.
So that's quite impressive, isn't it? Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, if motherhood